Now, moving on to our next headliner this morning, which is looking at where to focus with AI and how to build a stronger foundation for resiliency and competitiveness. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Gavin Pape, who's the global lead at CPG.AI, the growth strategy and advanced analytics at Accenture. I love these titles. Welcome on stage, Gavin.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you for the kind introduction, Babita. I am delighted to be with you here in Amsterdam and online. It's been some time since we've been able to be together, and my team have probably given me the longest title in the world on the screen behind us. I would like to talk to you today about delivering on the promise of AI and I'll explain what the and is for as we go through. But first, introduction. My name's Gavin Pape. I am a triathlete. I actually used to be a biochemist, so everything that we've just seen is very familiar. It takes me a long way back, but I pivoted across into being a consultant. As my badge says, I'm a consultant at Accenture. But most of all, I'm a Brit who married a Dutch girl. So I live in Amsterdam. It's wonderful to be able to cycle over here and talk to you today. But I have a global role. As the title says, I look after everything that we're doing on growth strategy, driven by data and AI in the consumer goods industry globally. And in that role, I guess I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun delivering for our clients. I have a lot of fun, and probably most fun, innovating with our teams and with the ecosystem. And as Laurence shared earlier at Accenture, we believe in the power of technology combined with human ingenuity to do things at a pace and a scale that we didn't previously think possible. And I frequently surprise myself as to how quickly we can move on things. And what I have personally observed is that the conversation on AI and data transformation has moved on in recent years. So I'd like to share a few of my kind of personal observations about how the conversation has shifted. I guess when I started getting involved in data analytics, in AI, we were starting to understand what it is. We were starting to believe and understand the power of prediction. At that time, we were trying to hire in data scientists, machine learning engineers. We trained business people like myself on AI. We tried to train data scientists and people who understood AI on business, and we invented roles like translators to try and glue these together. I guess we built squads. Everything was becoming agile at the same time. We organized those squads into vertically integrated teams. We tried to get them to work closely with the business. And through the experiments, the use cases that we were delivering, we tried to have an impact. And we found that many of the things that we were doing just wouldn't scale. And we realized we needed a data foundation. We needed something to actually feed the AI, the machine learning. So we started to work on highly automated, very intelligent data foundations to kind of feed the machines. And we need to do things differently in terms of the products. So we started to think about product ownership, not just product management. And whilst many of you or many of the people that you work with are still on that journey, what I've personally come to realize is that we need to unlock the full power of AI, we need to actually think about more than the algorithm. And that's where AI and comes from. So to explain how this has changed the way that we are thinking and working at Accenture, what I want to do is go back to an experience that I had a few years ago, and then I'll explain where this thing comes from. So at Accenture, you might know, we're lucky enough to partner with the ecosystem. It's wonderful that Microsoft are sponsoring today. We partner closely with Microsoft. We actually have a joint venture with Microsoft. We partner with Google, with Amazon. We partner with the third sector. We partner with universities, the World Economic Forum on things like climate change, sustainability, and many, many startups. And as part of our partnership with Amazon, I was lucky enough to go to Seattle to spend time with their product and their platform teams and start to I guess, spend time even in their operations, observing how their warehouses run. And I started to play a game, and I started to actually have a healthy obsession. Well, I think it was healthy, but you can all judge at the end of this as to whether it's healthy or not, and I hope you're convinced it's healthy. But when I looked at the Amazon warehouse, if I took a picture, and I started to get a red pen, and I drew a circle around anywhere in that warehouse where AI was designed in, I started to have a very crowded picture. AI was optimizing shelf placement. Computer vision was driving the robots that were moving the shelves to the edge of that floor for picking. AI was driving everything that was going on in terms of labeling and packing, and the gamification that was there to motivate the people who are picking things off the shelves and packing them for all of us at a speed that you cannot imagine. I'm not sure how many of you have been in a warehouse or seen the videos, but it's frightening. And if I took the same kind of idea and I took a screen grab of the e-commerce front end, or I took the back office commerce process, and I drew a red circle around where AI was designed in, it was a very crowded picture. Obviously, we all know that AI is driving personalization on the commerce front end. That's something that's industrialized at scale. But fraud checks were competing algorithms, some algorithms predicting whether a transaction was fraudulent, others checking whether that prediction was actually accurate so they didn't block too many transactions. Price matching. As a seller on Amazon, you try and distinguish between the retail and the Amazon channel so you can't price match. But AI was actually trying to unpick those deliberate differences that sellers were putting on their images, their product descriptions. And in the end, I ended up with a very crowded wall with lots of pictures, lots of red pen around it. And I started to reflect on how that looked compared to my current clients, and the picture's obviously very different. The pictures would be very empty. There would be some red rings, some good intent, but things really weren't operating at that kind of scale. And it got me thinking, what is it that was making the difference in Amazon versus what my clients were doing? And the first default, of course, was to think about the scale. They had vastly more data scientists, machine learning engineers than my clients did. But it wasn't about scale, we came to realize. It was about the teams with a really deep operational understanding of the process, of the business, working very closely with a data scientist or an ML engineer to actually design something differently with AI built in from the ground up. So it wasn't the number of people, it was actually the way that they're working together. And this was a pattern that we started to see, not just in Amazon, but across many digitally native businesses, businesses that were born digital, or processes in another business, an existing business that was born digitally native, like digital marketing. Fantastic example in an existing business of something that just works differently to the rest of the organization. And you know, it started this new way of thinking. It started this new way of thinking about how do we actually maximize the value from AI in combination with other parts of the business. So the notion of AI and was something that was born. It was something that we started to work on. It's something we started to get excited about as we were innovating. And what I want to do is share with you today 3 AI ands. I'll tell you which ones they are. And then it's been very quiet this morning. So Babita and I just plotted we're going to play a game. I've got a 4th one at the end. And I want you to guess what that 4th one is, the secret ingredient that underpins the first 3. And through the Q&A channel, please submit your guesses for what that 4th one is. So I hope we don't break the technology. We didn't ask the technical engineers when we just agreed to do this. But please do submit what that 4th one is. And the 3 that I want to talk about today are AI and processes, AI and communication, AI and partnerships. AI and processes is really about flexibility and agility. And if anybody has done process design before, you will probably think pre-COVID of a wall with Post-it notes and string. And I joke not, this is kind of how processes are still designed, even when we do it digitally with online tools. And a process naturally is a series of steps. One thing happens after the other. They're very long lines. They feed across silos, across business functions. One thing has to finish, and then it goes to something else. It's kind of regularly scheduled. And we put controls around them, and we've invented these things called systems. Accenture knows a thing or two about systems. And when we pour a system in, it's a problem, because it's like pouring concrete around the process, and it's not very flexible. We can't change very much. And that process that we traditionally see is very different from the way in which we're seeing these digitally native businesses or processes actually working. A process that was operating in a digital native is much more about tasks and activities that are triggered at the right point in time. And AI is determining that right point in time, very much like it determines how we target a marketing campaign. within a step in that process or an activity, AI is being used to actually take out work and tasks. So if Gavin approves a payment 95% of the time, why would I ask him and slow down the payment to the customer and have a bad experience? It'll automatically approve and it'll inform me afterwards. And if something's happening over there in sales, so in my world, let's say a promotion is underperforming, that's going to cause a problem for inventory, that's going to cause a problem in my financial plan, we're going to infer, using AI, the broader implication of what I've observed over there in sales, and take the action sooner across into supply chain. So what we came to realize when we talked about AI and process was that this new way of thinking, the new way of approaching this with AI designed to the process bottom up rather than AI overlaid onto an existing process was allowing us to work very differently, allowing us to be much more flexible and agile as we went through. And we've started to apply this in our clients. We've started to actually really make a difference in terms of the flexibility, the agility, the responsiveness and experience that we can enable. So that was my first one, AI and process. The second one is AI and communication. And this is about experience. So if I think about how I receive the news, if I think about how I get recommendations for the music on Spotify that I want to listen to, it's very immersive, it's very engaging. There's content which communicates to me in a way that draws me in. It's personalized, of course, we know that, but there are social nudges there as well that cause me to want to actually engage with that content. And if I reflect on the difference between that experience as a consumer and how we surface predictions within the business world and environment, again, it's quite a big difference. We talk about next best actions. It's normally a list of just go and do this thing. A field sales rep has to go and talk about this thing. We hide AI in the back of a manufacturing process. If I'm looking and using computer vision to look for, I don't know, the bubbles in the bullet of a lipstick as it comes off the manufacturing line at high pace, I'm actually hiding that AI in the background. And that's not driving an experience. It's not driving adoption. It's not allowing teams to understand actually the prediction. It's not actually making engaging for me to want to interact with the insight and the data. And my favorite example of this is thinking about a resources company that we worked with, where we started to work differently. We started to use the same ethnographic research and journey design for AI as we would use for e-com, but we would embed this to drive adoption in the business. So they'd started a data transformation journey. They were doing it the traditional way, and about 6 months in, they were struggling. Nobody was adopting it, and quite honestly, people were concerned that they were going to lose their jobs. And it caused the team to step back and think about how they would take journey design to the next level and bring this new way of thinking into how to apply AI in the business. It caused them to do the research of how people were operating on the lines day to day in the manufacturing facilities. It caused them to release very short, sharp videos actually to describe and bring to life how AI was being applied of 5 to 7 minutes across that process. And my favorite part of what they did was it caused them to relaunch their data catalog and their data marketplace as Spotify. They created a personalized, curated playlist for data and insight for every employee. They branded it as Spotify, and they launched it as Spotify. And lo and behold, the engagement levels went through the roof. And it wasn't just actually in kind of North America or Europe, where we think we're more familiar with these types of things. It was actually across all markets globally, and some of the smaller ones that were at the back of the queue typically, were actually learning and adopting AI at a pace and a scale which previously was not thought possible. So that's my second one, AI and communication, to really drive adoption and engagement and bring the recommendations to life in a very different way to we think about today. And my third one, so this is your last chance to submit your bonus idea, so please do send anything through. I'm going to look to the side and see whether we've broken the system or whether we're all just feeling a little bit quiet still. My third one is AI and partnership. Now, AI and partnership is really, for me, about unlocking the power of data and AI across the whole of the value chain, the whole of the ecosystem. My personal belief is that as soon as we share the data, as soon as we can actually have predictive models that can tell a supplier and the manufacturer about the supply chain risk, we can start to act faster. In my world, as soon as we can actually take the first-party data on a consumer and the insight we can use to generate an audience from a consumer goods company, we can share that with the same first-party data and insight to create an audience with retail, then we're going to have a much better experience when we go shopping. and there'll be a lot more efficiency through that end-to-end process. And of course, as we talked about earlier, the challenge on doing that is data, regulation, privacy, and there are many things that hold us back, rightly so, from making those things happen. So we started to think about the idea and the what if of could we actually get the power of the prediction, the power of the AI model, to benefit both organizations without actually moving or making visible the underlying data that exists. So we could join up the supplier and the manufacturer, we could both take actions, but we wouldn't actually have any concerns about moving data, the privacy, what would happen if that data was lost through insecurity. And it's possible today. In fact, in partnership with Microsoft, we can make this happen. We can have an AI model that is running on data that is not shared between two parties, that is not visible between those two parties, but there is a level of trust in the accuracy, the quality of that data. There is a level of trust in the accuracy of the predictions that are coming out of the model. And we can get suppliers and manufacturers to actually work together end-to-end in a much more joined-up way. And that, for me, is tremendously exciting, because AI in partnership is going to unlock a huge new wave of value. I don't know whether we've got any kind of guesses, but I will ask you to stop sending them in now, because I want to talk about the last one and take a step back, which I call AI and human ingenuity. I gave it away a little bit at the start. Laurence gave it away at the start. But the superpower of people who understand the operations of a business, but have the creativity, the imagination to take the picture of the process, just like the Amazon warehouse, to get out their red pen, draw circles around the 20, the 50, the 100 places where AI can be designed into that business, and actually do things differently, unencumbered by any historical notions of process, any historical notions of how things have operated. And whilst we're all competing hard for data scientists, ML engineers, I am personally competing the hardest for the number of individuals that combine that deep understanding of the business, that deep understanding of AI, and imagine how to do things differently. And that's what I call AI and human ingenuity. It's something which I truly believe is changing the way that we think about this. It's a talent which I personally try and foster in my teams. I really encourage all of you to be fostering in your teams. So I'll let you judge. I've had a pleasure in sharing my healthy obsession today in terms of pictures and red pens. I really encourage you all to take pictures, to draw red circles around on those pictures as how we can design AI in. At Accenture, we talk about change. I believe those people that are doing that are the true leaders of change. Let there be change. Thank you for having me at the World Summit AI. Thank you all for joining. I believe there's probably a few minutes just for questions as we close.
Thank you very much for that, Gavin. No takers yet, but I'm just going to ask to the floor if there are any questions for Gavin. Please do raise your hands. We've got our lovely team with roving microphones in the audience to facilitate your lovely voices this morning. Please do raise your hands to ask Gavin. It's not often that we get caliber of such speakers here, so please do.
Brave.
I'm going to say use and abuse, but you know what I mean, right? Hi.
Hi, I'm Max. I'm originally from Austria, but I study in Rotterdam now. I'm here as part of Erasmus Tech Consulting, and my question was, you said you're responsible for the growth strategy at Accenture. I was wondering, how do you incorporate, especially like AI and tech in general, in these days of where a big topic is sustainability, and how do you promote sustainable growth incorporating AI?
Good question. I think sustainability is on the minds of everybody at the moment. So how do you keep that thread through everything that you're doing?
Yeah, it's a really interesting combination of titles, right? I look after growth and AI, right? And it's because of this notion of what digital natives have started to do and platform companies have started to do with AI actually built into these to accelerate growth. And I think certainly the last one I talked about, AI and partnership, for me comes back to that sustainability agenda. We have to start being able to share the data in a meaningful way across the whole of the value chain. We have to understand not just the impact of things like manufacturing and process, but also the carbon footprint in a way that's trusted, that can be made visible, to all of the participants there, but also to consumers, because we ultimately make the choice. And bring that through. And a lot of what we're doing on the data foundations, a lot of what we're doing to actually not on the power of prediction, but to create that visibility, to allow us to all work end-to-end, is going to be super important for how we actually tackle sustainability. We move to things being climate and carbon neutral going forward. So there's the power of prediction, but I also think the data foundations and how we can connect them across the ecosystem is going to be just one of the most important building blocks on which we have to move forwards.
And it has to be at every stage of that process, right? From beginning to end. And even in the way that you're collecting data as well. I've had this conversation with somebody yesterday about AI collection and how that has to be at the forefront of everything we do, no matter what sector we're talking about. So thank you very much for that question. Any other questions for Gavin? Please do raise your hands in the audience for me. Just interestingly, you threw out, if there was a fifth idea or wish or whatever you want to say, out of the ones that you pointed out, where would you prioritize the 1 to 4 that you talked about?
Oh, the 4. We got started thinking about AI and process, but I'm particularly spending a lot of my time on the partnership one. It's again for the same reasons, because as I think all the way back up the value chain, and the data collection, you kind of mentioned, the data collection challenge, the trust challenge, the quality challenge that happens way before potentially you see that material that's coming into the manufacturing plant, that's really hard, right? The infrastructure's not necessarily there, but we need to be able to crack that to get that full visibility end to end, and to get everybody working together. So we got into this thinking about the first one. I personally think the last one's the most challenging, the most exciting, but we need the people. We need the people who can imagine.
And that expertise, right? A question coming through online, thank you for this. For healthcare startups interested in developing AI systems for hospitals through this bottom-up approach, do you think the 4 concepts would differ from other sectors?
I don't think they do, because how we apply them will be different by sector, but I think the idea of how the processes are run, how we join up supply and demand, how we communicate and engage anybody in any business, and how we actually create visibility on data end-to-end are broad concepts. We deliberately thought about processes around to start with around the connection of sales, finance, and supply, because in the corporate and the business environment, those things exist, and in life science, in a hospital environment, they'll have different sub-buckets, but they'll have different names. But the concept of matching supply and demand and everything that happens is fundamental, is I think, across many, many sectors. So.